Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm excited to welcome our special guest, Nick Levett. Welcome, Nick. How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Good.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. The first person to ask. It's great to have Nick for this episode. He was previously our head of coaching at UK Coaching, as well as working for the FA in a variety of roles for nearly 25 years, and now works as a consultant. Nick, 25 years coaching football from grassroots all the way up, with players who've gone on to win international honours and play at the top level. So tell me a little bit about how you've shaped your coaching philosophy over that time.
Yeah, I think if I probably look back to when I first started coaching, I don't think I was coaching. I think I was probably, how would I describe it? A technical instructor, maybe. I was an organiser. I don't know what the technical term is for someone that herds cats, but I think when you're working with young children, I think there's certainly some of that in there as well. It probably wasn't until maybe in the last probably 10 to 15 years, maybe 10 years, that I've really started to have a different view on what coaching looked like and probably feels like. So there's definitely been a huge amount of kind of evolution over that period of time now, largely shaped by thinking probably I didn't know it all, that there must be other ways of doing it. And I think, no doubt, stuff we'll get into today, but as soon as you ask the kids, well, what do you think? And they go, I don't like this very much. You go, maybe I should start to think about how I do things. But definitely influenced by people around me. And I think I was fortunate with a generation of experts at the FA that shaped my coaching. There's a guy called Craig Simmons, and Craig's in his 80s now. Just so forward thinking in terms of the way that he thought about player development and young people. A guy called John Allpress, who was a huge influence on my coaching. John, I don't know if John's still at Tottenham now as a football kind of advisor. And I remember saying to John once, who helped shape your coaching? Where was the influence on you? And he sent me towards a woman called Lynn Kidman. And Lynn is a Kiwi by trade, now retired in Australia. And Lynn was incredible. And when she was the mentor of All Blacks coaches, you then go, maybe she knows a little bit. And then I was fortunate to spend time with Lynn. She worked over here for a couple of years, so spent a lot of time with Lynn and help really shape what I probably thought of coaching to be. And alongside that, I appreciate this is definitely a ramble about the background. Alongside that, I stumbled across a thing called Roger Hart's Ladder of Participation, right? So one of my early roles at the FA, I was involved in setting up the young leadership programs. And I had to run a young leadership camp where we had 100 16, 17-year-olds come in, and we put them through a week of coaching, refereeing, medical. We did it at a school in Ascot that was like Hogwarts. It was like 400 years old. It was incredible. Like, it wouldn't have passed anything from a health and safety perspective, but it was a brilliant environment. So we did this for a week, and then about 6 months later, my boss then said to me, you need to start to think about organising next year's camp. And I said, I'm not going to do it. And she said to me, well, you need to, it's your job. And I said, well, what I want to do is I want to bring back 8 to 10 of the previous year's cohort, and they can organise the next year's camp. They can run it, organise it, lead it, plan it. They can do the lot. And she said to me, I remember she was driving back from Cornwall, and she went, it will never work. I said, okay, well, let's see what happens. And it's still going now, and it has spiraled into young people, mentoring young people. They have national leadership forums. They do all sorts. But that all came from this Roger Hart's ladder that I'd stumbled across, which basically said different rungs, and it was, at the bottom of it was, adults do everything to kids or to young people. They're not involved in any decision making. And if you work the way up the ladder, there was things like young people are asked their views, but it's just tokenistic. all the way through to it's shared decision making between adults and young people. And I remember saying to my boss at the time, Donna, I said, that's where we've got to get to. And I think that has just hugely influenced probably what my coaching then looks like over the years, but driven by a level of humility in thinking I might be wrong here. And there might be better ways to do it, but having some really cool people around that I could chat to.
When you had that light bulb moment around child-led coaching, because that's what it kind of sounds like you've had, did you face many barriers to that? How sceptical were people about going in that direction?
Well, yeah, like I said, I can remember Donna saying it's never going to work. But I would also say, I think, and again, this is probably more recent, over the last couple of years, in my head, it's probably not child-led anymore. I think I've moved more towards co-created. So this becomes an environment that is shaped by me as a coach with X amount of years of experience and in theory should know a little bit, as well as the kids. So it's a shared co-created environment, because people start to get this fear that if we say it is child-led, and if I asked my son what he wanted for dinner every day, he'd say pizza and ice cream.
Same.
Yeah. To be fair, I would have pizza. If I could have pizza and ice cream every day, it would be the greatest ever. But I know that that's probably not going to be the healthiest diet. So it's my job as a parent to help educate my son to say that, well, look, there might be some other things that might be more healthy here. So if I give you option A and option B, and now you choose option A, now we're involved in this together, but I'm using my knowledge of a little bit of something more nutritional, but he gets a choice. So he still gets an input. So I think it's co-created environments. The biggest obstacle that I still see now is an adult that believes they know everything.
How linear was the journey to getting that to that point of co-creativity? I'm really interested in that, because it sounds perhaps that on that journey to giving children self-advocacy and letting them lead coaching sessions, that's when you kind of hit barriers or hit bumps in the road where you realise you do need to give them that guidance. So give me some examples of that, of where it hasn't always worked, but times where you've found solutions to those issues and where it really has come off as a success.
I was in Dubai and I was doing some coach education for a load of coaches there. A friend of mine used to run a big coaching company. And he said, Nick, will you come out and do some stuff for us? I was like, yeah, it's cool. I was doing a session in a sports hall. I can still picture this little 8-year-old blonde-haired kid. And I was doing a game, and most of my practices are games in that sense. And I was like, right, we've done level 1, we've done level 2, we've done level 3. I don't think you're ready for level 4 yet. And they're like, oh, what's level 4? I'm like, I don't think you're ready for it. And then this little blonde-haired kid goes, could level 4 be this and we do that? And I'm like, man, that's a way better idea than what my level 4 was going to be. Let's do that. And it was that moment, and I've just gone, let's see what they think. What do they like? What don't they like? Sometimes it's like a ridiculous thing that's just like, yeah, that's just not going to be possible. We can't do that. But we can do a little bit of that. But this little boy's progression for my practice at that time, for our group of kids in the environment we're in, was better than mine. So I was like, let's just do that. But it comes back to sometimes a coach has a plan, and it might well be well thought out and meticulous and organised and structured and linear. But if something happens, the skill of the coach is to recognise when they have to go off-piste a little bit. And this isn't what the kids need now. The kids need something different.
Yeah.
Or the kids are suggesting they want to do something different. But that's the skill of me in that co-created space to go, they might want this, but that's not what they need. Mm-hmm. And there's a subtle difference between want and need. I can remember when I was in an FA role, and we were setting up a national coaching program for 5 to 11s. We had 90 full-time coaches. And I can remember a guy, we were doing the interview. It was in Moss Side in Manchester. Tough area, some challenging kids. And a coach came up to us who was there for an interview for a full-time job at the FA. It's quite a big thing for this guy. Alan, his name was. And he said, here's the session plan I'm going to deliver today. I was like, okay, cool. Look nice, neat, organised, structured. Cool. He starts off, he gets them playing. 2 minutes in, he comes over to me and my colleague and he goes, that session plan that I gave you, I'm not doing it. These kids just need to play a game. And I was like, that works for me. Because he's identified what the kids need and he's adapted straight away and gone, I need to do something different. So the challenge is the coach that then sticks to their plan because that's what they've planned. And it's definitely not a linear pathway. And I would say I've probably swung from that technical instructor bit where I've told what to do the whole time. But I am going to put a little asterisk on that and say sometimes there is a place for that. I've probably swung all the way then to it being too child-led. And I think the sweet spot is knowing when to move along that continuum, but ultimately to co-create.
So how much is child-led coaching not about giving the keys to the kingdom to the kids that you've got there? It's about being a more malleable coach and letting them guide the session as opposed to taking it over.
I think part of it is listening to kids, but that requires a willingness to be open-minded, to think that they have something of value to add to the conversation. Because, you know, I always talk about my son's football team as it's our team. It's not my team. It's our team. And our includes all the parents, because we're a little community of people that are helping these young people grow through sport. So it's the collective. The listening part is at the first bit of that. Because unless you start to hear what the kids are saying, what they're thinking, you won't be able to take it into that different space. Now, I think a lot of the time, coaches in many sports will often have that question from young people that says, can we have a game? Can we play a game now? And I think sometimes the root cause of that is because they're bored and your coaching is crap. Like they want to do something more fun. Now, again, there's a time for deep learning where things get frustrating and tricky and hard and you have to let the kids flounder. But that has to be part of an intentional process for learning. But if the kids are saying we're really bored, and often then coaches experience kids that mess about, and we've all been there, right, as coaches, and I still get it now. I'm definitely not perfect by any stretch. I don't think I've done a perfect coaching session ever. The kids that mess about are often because they find it too easy or they find it too hard. Mm-hmm. So you're not kind of hitting that sweet spot for the kids of challenge and stretch and where learning might take place. So the skill is definitely, that's where asking, observing, what you're noticing as a coach, that all plays into then moving the session in the direction that you and the kids think it should be going.
In a move from prescriptive coaching to a more collaborative, which is what you're talking about here, what impact is that going to have longer term, do you think, on keeping kids engaged with sport, not just in that session, in that moment, but as athletes going forward into teenage years and adulthood?
So we have to think about what sport for, right? And I remember saying on social media a long time ago, grassroots sport is not about the amount of trophies that you win, it's about the difference that you make to young people. And I stand by that comment to this day. We just use sport as a vehicle to help develop young people. So they will learn about managing their emotions. They'll learn about being in a team, because I work in a team sport. They will learn about other people from different backgrounds. They'll learn about some things that give them confidence. They'll give them learning about learning. It will give them the physical stuff. You know, they might be able to run a bit better or have a bit more agility or balance or coordination and be able to kind of move their body in a different way. I think there's a million things that sport is used for, and the key is for adults is not to forget that, ultimately.
there's an old adage not to work with kids and animals, but you've obviously either never been told that one, Nick, or never heard it and ignored it or whatever. You've spent a lot of your career working with those younger age groups, those kind of under 11s and stuff like that. What have you learned from coaching smaller children that you perhaps didn't from coaching adults or youth football?
I think they're a lot more similar than we think.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. A couple of seasons ago, I was running my sons, they were under 8s then, under 8s football team. And I was also coaching a semi-professional men's football team that had players earning anywhere between £200 and £500 a week to play football and had a full-time job. It's not too bad, really, is it, if you think about it, just for playing a bit of football. I would do the same session with the under 8s on a Tuesday night, and I would then do it with the first team of men on a Thursday night.
Who'd moan more, the kids or the adults?
Neither, thankfully. But that, I think, was because the mechanisms of the sport are exactly the same, right? The goals are at either end. You've got boundaries to a pitch, and it's one team trying to stop them scoring and the other team trying to score. Like the function of the game is the same. All that happened was the grown-ups did it faster, quicker, with a bit more deception and a bit more disguise. But the game itself was often very similar. So I might do a game that was a warm-up game that was ultimate frisbee, but the under 8s weren't very good at throwing. I definitely know that. Although, to be fair, a guy called Nico did lose my son's frisbee over the fence in the adult team, so arguably some of the adults weren't very good at throwing either. But the game was the same. It's still 3v3 and 4v4, and it's still identifying space. It's still about playing forwards. It's still about scoring in the end zone, but they just did it in a faster, more deceptive, disguised way. So the mechanism of the game is exactly the same. And tactically, they might have solved the problem differently. But as soon as you get the under 8s together and you go, what are you trying to do here? Well, I'm trying to get away from that person that's marking me to get into space so they can throw me the ball. Cool. That's no different to what the adults do. So I think there's probably more similarities at times. I think you still have to be patient. I probably did more shoelaces with the under 8s.
I thought you were going to say with the adults then.
Well, yeah. But I think coaching is, you still have to think really intently about what that coaching looks like. So the conversations I might have on one-to-ones with the 7, 8, 9-year-old kids when I'm doing my grassroots stuff, it's an intentional conversation based on something, but it is as intentional. So I can remember in pre-season training, where the changing rooms were with the men's team to the car park. It's probably about 80-metre walk. I did 7 80-metre walks, one-to-ones with players.
Yeah.
Because that was my coaching time. Mm-hmm. I had to, that was it. I used that moment to, in quotes, coach, because coaching doesn't just happen on the grass. But that was intentional. So I think there's a lot of very similar things. You're still trying to help a human improve their performance. Some of it might have been technically, tactically. Some of it might have been emotionally and psychology-based stuff. And that happens in both places. So probably very similar, but just the delivery might look different.
One thing I want to pick up on is you've talked about playing ultimate frisbee with both groups, the kids and the adults. Is that something you've done since the beginning of your coaching career, adopted other sports and adapted other things and brought them into football, or is that something you've learned and moved with over time?
I think it's probably changed over time. The more I got curious about what I could learn from other sports. The value of multi-sport is pretty clear from a talent development perspective. But equally, I'm really of the view, certainly with the kids, I'm certainly of the view that who knows what sport they're going to play when they're older, right? I need to try and give them a base of movement solutions to problems that they face in the game. What that looks like is entirely down to them. And so there's if I think about my grassroots team at the moment, right? So there's two kids. One kid last season fell over twice when there was no one near him. Like he just walked sideways and fell over. And I can still remember him down, like literally down in front of me. And I was like laughing at him going, what are you doing? He went, just fell over my own feet. Right. So he needs some movement solutions to help him physically in a very different way to another kid who might be quick, agile, flows like water. But they need different things. And I think the skill for me as a coach is to be able to provide them a base of movement skills that will help them whatever sport they go and play on. So I will use a lot of hand-eye coordination stuff. So we'll play a lot of rugby. We'll play some American football. We'll do ultimate frisbee. We'll do all sorts of tag games, chase games. Because if a kid gets to the age of 11, 12, whenever, and then thinks, I don't want to play football anymore, I want to go and do this. I'm like, cool, no worries. But they should be able to transfer with a base of movement skills that they can then apply in a different situation. Grassroots sport generally, for 99% of kids, is not about helping them become a professional athlete. It's helping them become a better young person.
When you take these different sports and variations on sports into sessions with kids, do you have an expectation of what you're going to learn, or do you go in ready to be surprised by those activities?
I think you just have to be really open-minded to it. What is it that you can take, adapt, change, plagiarize, and add to your coaching practice? But again, it has to be intentional, right? So there's a model called the athletic skills model, which is kind of come from Holland, builds on a lot of kind of physical movement skills, breaks it down, and that talks about different movement patterns, whether it's a throwing type thing, or it's a climbing action, or it's a running action, whatever it might be. But it talks about donor sports. So what are the activities or game-related stuff that you can apply across sport? So if I do some ultimate frisbee, there's some running, there's some catching, there's some forward passing, there's some spatial recognition, there's decision making. All of that applies to football, right? So I'm thinking about that. But sometimes you might have to do stuff as a multi-sport that's purely just for multi-sport's sake. So there's absolutely no link back to it other than you're giving the kids a broader base of movement solutions. So I did some stuff with the kids last year, which was dance related. Hilarious. Hilarious. Even better when I got the parents to do it. So the parents all stood there laughing at the kids not being able to do it. I'm like, cool, in you come then, let's have a look. And it was just patterning of stuff, a 1, a 2, 2, a 1, but it was a left, a right, a right, a left, a right, and it was 2 feet together, 1 feet together. So it was movement skills based, but rhythm based. No direct relationship, but it will help them understand about patterning and timing and different types of things. That if they go into a different sport, it might be helpful. There's starting to be some research now about donor sports that might be helpful for other sports. So there's some research within golf, for example, that talks about how playing a lot of pool and snooker as a kid is helpful for golfers. Certainly on the green, and you think about the weight of putting and distances and those kind of things. But I don't think we're really clear of what that looks like in all sorts of different sports yet. But I think if you can do it with intent, i.e. I think this is going to give them something that might be of benefit, then cool.
And sometimes it's that psychology of them thinking that as well. I always think it's quite interesting how Patrick Mahomes equates being the best player in the NFL to the fact that he was a baseball player when he was a youngster, and that's why he throws so well, whereas it's not necessarily a natural connection, is it? In terms of bringing these other things in, obviously at those moments kids feel like they are having their play time within a session. How important is that psychologically for kids to have that release, even within a football session, to think they're doing something that isn't necessarily learning?
Go back to it was a long time ago now for me, PE at school, right? We would, if we had PE after break, we'd go down in our break time, that 20 minutes after double science or whatever you sat through, right? You go, I've got basketball after lunch, right? Let's go and do 20 minutes and we'll just go and play. And you go in the sports hall, you get changed and you just play end to end, like however many kids turned up. And then the PE teacher would come along and go, right, now it's time to start the lesson. Everybody get in a line and you're going to do layups and you're going to take one bounce and then you're going to throw it off that little black bit behind the ring, and that's how
Nobody
you're going to do it.
Nobody shoot.
No.
Yeah.
And then what would happen is you'd do this and you'd stand in this long line and you'd miss because I wasn't very big and it was a long way up. Like, and you'd try and launch this object. And
that didn't quite have enough air in it either. And...
it was just, I wasn't very good at all. So I definitely, any excuse like that was helpful. But then, so you do all of this in a really long line and then they put you in a game and then you go, well, the skill that I've just learnt now is absolutely useless because I've got Simon Hollingdale in front of me and he's 3 foot bigger. And I can't throw it over his arms, or I've come in at a different angle and I hadn't practiced that, so I can't do it. And all the fun and play that you were doing where you were adapting to different things that were in front of you at the time, and it became irrelevant because you went into this really structured, linear, non-play environment. So I think you probably have to go back to some of those moments and go, what did I really enjoy the most? How can I use play to inform what I do in my coaching? And I laughed then because we had a new kid come to football, right? About 6 weeks ago. And at our grassroots coaching session, kids will turn up and they're just going to play. Like they go off into a goal. Half the time I've got no idea what they're doing. I can see them, right? They've not gone over the hill or anything. Safe. I can see them. So they go off and play. 10 minutes. Parents have a chat, coaches have a chat, and that is generally the first 10, 12 minutes of every session. Just go off and do what you want. Just go play. And then they come back in, and we always say, the first thing we do every week, what's the highlight of your week? Every kid has to say, what's the highlight of their week? And they'll always talk about different stuff at school. I went to see this at the weekend. I went here with my brother or sister, got a new dog. My parents are getting divorced.
Oh, wow.
Right? My nan's died. And kids, that's their highlight of their week, right?
News they want to tell.
Yeah. But what for us, it's going, right, okay. So that kid's behaviour is now something we can understand.
Yeah.
Because if over the next 3 weeks they're a bit all over the shop or they're feeling a bit down, I can start to understand why. And that they're really comfortable in sharing that in front of us. But that first bit is play. And the first thing, right, what are we doing? We're going to go into a game or we're going to go into this. And this new kid turned up, right? And he went, wait, we're just going to play a game. I'm like, yeah, it's cool, isn't it? And he was like, we never did this. He said, we were lucky if we got a game. I was like, okay, well, we're going to have a game, right? But we're going to come out of that game and then we're going to do some stuff that help us get a little bit better at the game. And then we're going to go back and see if we can do it. He was like, that's so cool. That's sick. I'm down with the kids. I know those words, right?
Clearly.
Brilliant. So we go play. But we'll do stuff now that starts to bring the parents into that play. So we did some stuff where I said to the kids, right, get a ball each and you're going to go and teach your mate a trick. Don't care what it is, what the trick is, but you have to try it in the game.
Okay.
That's the only thing you have to try in the game. So the kids are teaching each other tricks. Go off, we play a game. They get a bonus point if they try their new thing. Come back. But the play bit is serious play, right? Because that's experimentation.
Yeah.
And it's deliberate. We stop it. They play for a bit of time. Game. Come back in. Right, you're now going to come together as a team and you're going to teach each other the ones that you've just learned. And then you're going to choose one that the whole team gets double points if you do. They go back out. They play the game again. They come back in and they're like, right now, you're going to get a ball and you're going to go and teach your mum or dad your trick, which the kids think is brilliant, right? So they go off and they are teaching their mum and dad how to do the trick that they've just been working on. And it's hilarious. But there's a level of serious learning underpinning all of this, right? It's not just madness in my own head, which it often is. Because we get better at something if we can teach someone else it.
Yeah. Because
we're hardwiring the circuits. It's called myelination. So we're hardwiring the circuits in our brain if we can start to teach someone else it, because you're having to recall this and now share it with someone else, right? That's some deeper learning you're heading towards. The parents then realise they're not very good. Kids think it's brilliant. Cool, come back in. Double points if you do your trick, go play. So then I can get all the parents together and explain why we've done this.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, yeah, never realised that. And Jim, the rugby coach, who's also one of the dads, he's like, I am so rubbish at football. I'm like, cool. Now you can practice it at home together.
Yeah.
So we're layering what this learning looks like, but it's built upon play and experimentation and trying stuff.
A running theme through these podcast conversations has been that play and child-led coaching can sometimes be seen as at odds with talent identification and development. What do you say to that?
When you start to look at talent ID and research around talent ID, and you start to look at what are the backstories of elite players, and I can talk to this a little bit because some of my master's was in the journeys of elite footballers, right? So I spent a lot of time with the England under-21s talking about their journeys, what were the biggest things, what were the impact. Whenever you speak to any elite player, informal play has a huge part within it, right? It's a huge part of it. So a lot of the players, and certainly now we're sat in London, and London has a lot of multi-use concrete games, cages, where kids will just go and play against other kids. Kids will play against older kids. So you've got 12-year-olds playing against 15, 16, 18-year-olds. And you have to learn very quickly to shift the ball, move. Like, no one's coaching that stuff. That is play-based stuff. But they're getting so much from it. Not just the football skills, but the social skills and the cultural understanding. And it's peer-led learning, much like a lot of the kind of the skateboard, new adventure sports. It's very peer-led kind of cultures. So they're non-coached. But that play is really important. And it forms the basis of many of their experiences. I think we're also at a time now where society has decided that adults letting their kids out to go and play on their own is not safe anymore. So kids don't necessarily experience that. Just 20 kids over the park in the local village just playing on their own. So sometimes now as adults, we have to play a role in shaping what play looks like. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean we organise it, because then it starts to move away from play to coaching. But if we just take our kids and say, look, go play, that's really important. But that is a fundamental part of what talent experiences look like in many, many sports. So recognising that it's part of it. It's not the only thing, though. So play is important. Coach-led environments are important. Coaching is important. I think when you start to get into talent pathways, when you then have a young person who is an athlete as well, and I'm being quite deliberate with my words here, because they're a young person first, and one of the risks that we have from talent pathways is what's called identity foreclosure. Mm-hmm. So I associate my whole identity as a young footballer, mm-hmm. or as a young cricketer, or as a swimmer, and then when somebody then deems you not good enough to go further in that talent pathway, your identity is shot to pieces. Mm-hmm. That's a challenge for young people, we know. So you are a young person who happens to be pretty good at a sport, whatever that sport might be. And you do need adults around you that can help shape what that experiences look like, because there's some very smart people that can help you with sports science or strength and conditioning or nutrition or sports psychology, as well as the sport technical tactical. So it's part of everything. I was with a GB canoeing coach last week, and two of the athletes that he works with. He works with 2 boats in his words, and he's working with Olympians, right, that have won medals at the very, very pinnacle of their sport, and his was a co-created environment. And we went down to do some debriefs with the paddlers after they'd done a couple of runs, and he was like, "What do you think?" And the athlete just talked about, "Yeah, I did this, I did that, I did that," and the coach just went, "Yeah, probably agree with that. Yeah. What are you going to do next time? What needs to shift? Yeah, but if I go into it," and the athlete led everything,
Mm-hmm.
but that's where we want to try and get to, where the athlete comes in and is demanding of the coaches around him. A friend of mine worked at Man United for years through the Fergie era and through the whole Ronaldo time, and he said to me, Ronaldo was the hardest player to work with and the easiest player to work with. He said he was the easiest because he was driven to be the best in the world every single day, but he was the hardest because he was so demanding on all the staff around him. And he said, "I need this from you today, I need this from you today." And that's ultimately where you want to get to, is that
Self-advocating athletes.
Absolutely. With a level of autonomy over the future direction of their career.
Nick, I was going to ask you, I've got it written down here, what the ideal split between coach-led and child-led sessions is. But the more that we've talked today, the more I've learned that for you, that is a thread that runs through a whole session. So if we've got coaches listening who feel like they are coaching in a prescriptive manner and they're not listening enough to the children that they're coaching, what would be your piece of advice as a jump-off point for them to start to adjust their sessions?
The first thing for me is just to ask the kids the questions, or the young people, whoever you're working with. Like, it could be adults as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you like? What don't you like? What would you like more of? What would you like less of? And a friend of mine uses a question which I really like, which is, what one thing?
Yeah. So
what one thing would you like more of from me? Or what one thing would you like less of from me? And in my previous role, I was working at a Premier League football club. And I was doing some work with the coaches, was the primary role. And it was my first week at the club. And everybody was sat around. You had probably 10 different staff, full-time staff, that were strength and conditioning, nutrition, sports science, coaches, psychologists, like analysts, player care. Like, there was so many people. Player review evenings. We're going to do this. We're going to share this back. Blah blah blah. And I put my hand up, and I said, "When do the players review you?" And there was this kind of collective silence around the room. I was like, "But why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you get feedback?" And the lead coach of the 9s to 11s took it on brilliantly, and he went and spoke to the kids, and then the kids developed with the coach an individual development plan for the coach, and it was put up on the wall in the changing rooms. So the kids said, "We want more of this," or "We want you to do less of this." So the coach could then work on that with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
There was another coach I worked with, and I said to one of the players, "What one thing would you like more of or less of from this particular coach?" And he said to me, he does ramble on. It's like, okay, cool. So then there's some great feedback for the coach to go, okay, I can start to now. It's a little nudge towards being more child-led, right? But you're asking them what they want more of, less of, and then using that to inform what the session looks like. So I would probably lead with one of those questions. Go and ask the kids for some feedback.
Nick, this has been an incredibly educational chat for me, and I'm sure everyone listening agrees. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. Check out our website, www.playtheirway.org, and follow Play Their Way on social media at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.